This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President-elect Trump highlighting mass deportation as one of his first priorities in the new administration. It comes as he continues to talk with world leaders and weigh cabinet decisions from Mar-a-Lago. And we just learned moments ago that Trump has tapped Susie Wiles, his longtime advisor and key strategist to the Trump 2024 campaign, as his chief of staff. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more from West Palm Beach, Florida.
For a second day in a row, President-elect Trump from Mar-a-Lago is taking calls from world leaders calling to congratulate him and hashing out his cabinet members and policies for his incoming administration. Susie Wiles, Trump's longtime advisor and key strategist to Trump's 2024 campaign, tapped as Trump's chief of staff. In a Thursday afternoon interview with NBC, Trump reportedly outlined his day one priorities, vowing to take action at the southern border and implement a mass deportation plan regardless of the price tag. Trump also told NBC that he's talked to some 70 world leaders in the past 2 days, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Trump says he will also talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin. And Trump's transition team says it's working to present to Trump a wide array of experts for him to pick for his new team. While there's quite a list being floated, some are being talked about the most often. For Secretary of State, names include Senator Marco Rubio, who leads national security efforts and serves on the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, and Richard Grenell, the former acting director of national intelligence under Trump. For Defense Secretary, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo could return to run the defense agency. For Attorney General, names being floated include Senator Mike Lee, an attorney previously specialized in Supreme Court litigation, and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who Trump has said was under consideration. Trump's also talked about tapping RFK Jr. to lead health and food policy and Elon Musk to lead efforts to cut government spending. Meanwhile, Trump has repeatedly said that one of the biggest lessons from his first term was the importance of picking the right people. This time around, he's expected to pick people who are loyal to him and would ensure a smooth implementation of his vision for the country. Reporting from West Palm Beach, Iris Tao, NTD News.
As Washington prepares for the upcoming administration, NTD's Sam Wong went to the National Mall to find out what people think about Trump's second victory in the race for the White House.
What's your reaction to the election result, and did your candidate win?
My candidate did not win. Trump tended to outperform the polls in the past, so that was probably what's going to happen, but life will go on.
So my candidate did win, and all I would say is one nation under God. We love each other.
Well, I was rooting for RFK, and so when you paired with Trump, then I went to Trump, so I'm happy.
My candidate did not win, and I was shocked.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked and disappointed. I had a lot of hope.
I'm a Trump supporter. I was happy. Hopefully we'll see some change.
I'm horrified at the results. I think our country's in a lot of trouble.
He won. My reaction is I'm grateful that it's over and that we have peace.
Coming up in the next 4 years, would you give Trump a chance?
Probably not, nope.
I don't see things going well, but I'm hoping for the best.
Did you guys vote for him in 2016 and 2020?
I did in 2016. I gave him a chance then and then saw the results.
And to give him the keys again for another 4 years is like Harry Carey.
Give him a chance?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I hope he would listen to his advisors, and advisors of all types, not just echo chamber.
What are you hoping to see in the next 4 years?
So I hope to see the economy change. I'm a pro-Constitution gal, so I am hoping that our religious liberties are protected.
More jobs, more financial, small business actually succeeding instead of larger companies taking everything.
I like about RFK's position on big pharma and vaccine regulations and synthetic food dyes.
Hoping to see end of wars, opportunity to have my kids be prepared to be able to get homes. I love America, and I'm grateful for the leaders, past and present, for who they are, and I look forward to having that same thing happen in the future.
Trump's legal team is working to get the conviction dismissed in his New York business records case. As of now, Judge Juan Merchan is considering whether to toss the conviction. That's in light of the Supreme Court's ruling over the summer on presidential immunity. Judge Merchan gave himself until November 12th to decide that matter, with a sentencing scheduled for November 26th if he keeps the conviction. Trump's lawyers don't want to wait for any of that. They are expected to argue Trump is entitled to the same constitutional protections as a sitting president. As such, they would ask for the conviction to be thrown out. New York Attorney General Letitia James addressed Trump's win yesterday. James said she may work with the new administration, but says she will not compromise on New York's values or principles. James says her team has spent months preparing for the challenge of a Trump administration. She vowed to once again use the rule of law to defend New Yorkers. President Biden makes his first public speech following Trump's victory. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more from the White House.
President Biden addressing the nation from the White House's Rose Garden here, talking about how he called former president and now president-elect Donald Trump to congratulate him on his victory and also to invite him to the White House, although a date has not yet been announced on when that will be. Now, as far as how voters must be feeling right now, President Biden addressed that, saying that he called for unity amid political differences.
You can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your neighbor only when you agree.
Biden also thanked those election workers who worked tirelessly, many of them volunteers, for getting those results processed. He also praised Vice President Kamala Harris in her campaign.
She gave her whole heart and effort, and she and her entire team should be proud of the campaign they ran.
Biden dropped out of the race back in July and endorsed Harris. Now, when asked if he regrets that decision and whether the results would have turned out differently, the White House had this to say.
President Biden believes that he made the right decision when he decided to step aside. This was not the outcome that our team had wanted. So are we disappointed? Yes, we are disappointed. But we also respect. We respect the outcome of the election. We respect what the American people voted for, wanted.
President Biden said that there's still a lot to be done within the next and last 70 or so days of his presidency. Now, earlier, he just signed an executive order which extends an emergency declaration for about 1 year that prevents the U.S. from investing in Chinese companies that go directly to help its military, saying that the Chinese Communist Party's military is a national security threat. Reporting from the White House, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama congratulated President-elect Trump and Senator Vance on X yesterday. The statement read, quote, "Living in a democracy is about recognizing that our point of view won't always win out." The pair called on the American public to work together. The former first couple also wrote that progress requires people to show grace to people you deeply disagree with. The Obamas said they couldn't be prouder of Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, calling them two extraordinary public servants who ran a remarkable campaign. The pair stated that tough economic conditions and other factors have created problems for Democratic incumbents around the world.
Yep.
And the balance of power in the House of Representatives is still in play. Will Republicans have complete control of Washington, or will Democrats manage an upset and flip the lower chamber of Congress? NTD's Washington correspondent Luis Martinez joins us with the latest from the races that have yet to be called. Luis, take it away.
Of course, before jumping into the House of Representatives and how those races are going, that's still in play, let's look at the latest results from the Senate. We know that Republicans have a majority, 53 Senate seats. That 53rd Senate seat was called today. That was the state of Pennsylvania that Republicans flipped with Dave McCormick beating Bob Casey today, 99% of the votes. And that's only 31,000 votes more than Bob Casey, that was looking his third term to be reelected his third term. I also want to mention Arizona. We still don't have the final results. Maricopa County, there's still about 600,000 ballots that need to be counted. That's 69% of the votes so far. Ruben Gallego, current congressman, Democratic congressman, is leading in the polls in relation to Kari Lake. Now, the margins are way closer than was expected before November 5th in the polls. The margin was 6 points. As we can see right here, is only 50,000 votes ahead, only 2 percentage points. We still don't have a final result either from the Senate race in the state of Nevada. Clark County is still counting about 400,000 ballots. We have 91% of the votes in. Jackie Rosen is leading by 1 point, but this is going back and forth since November 5th, so we still need those 9 percentage points more of votes to be counted to have a definitive result. Now, I also want to mention, before jumping to the House, something that I found very interesting, which was the Senate race in the state of Maryland. Now, Maryland has been blue for the past 3 election cycles. If we actually go to 2018, let's look it up in the map of the country. If we go to the state of Maryland, in 2018, Democrats won by a ginormous margin. They're like over 30 points in 2018. Now skip 6 years ahead. There's a new, that same Senate seat is going under re-election. And what we see is how Republicans have closed the gap. So this is going to be really important for the midterm elections in 2022, because it seems like Maryland is turning red for the Senate seat, and that might affect also some House races. Now, let's go to the House, which is still in play. Republicans right now have 209 seats of those 435, magic number being 218, which is the majority. Democrats only have 197. So as of right now, Republicans have actually flipped 2 seats and a net gain of 2 seats, and Democrats have lost seats, two seats this cycle. The ones that we're still waiting for, Tiffany, they're all in the state of California. Those are going to be the key races to be looking out for the next few days to have the results. If we go to California's 13th district, Republican is holding his ground, the incumbent, John Duarte. Here in California's 22nd district, David Valadao is also holding his ground, the incumbent. If we go down to California's 40th district, Young Kim, incumbent, holding the ground. So Republicans, Ken Calvert also in California's 41st, holding the ground for Republicans. This was the path for Democrats to flipping the House. And it's not happening as of now. Of course, there's still votes coming in, and we need to finish to see where that finishes off. There's also a couple of races to look in Arizona. We are looking at Juan Ciscomani in District 6 that just half an hour ago, Kirsten Engel was ahead, and yesterday Juan Ciscomani was again ahead. So this keeps on changing. We still have about 23% of the votes to be counted. So the House of Representatives is still in play. It seems that Republicans are on path to reaching that 218 number and maintaining the majority. So that will give them control of the White House, of the Senate, and of the House of Representatives if it comes to fruition. Back to you, Tiffany.
All right, Luis, thanks for that. Fierce winds threaten to exacerbate already ravenous wildfires in California, which have exploded in size in one day, burning over 14,000 acres and forcing the evacuations of at least 14,000 people. 2 wildfires are exploding just outside Los Angeles. The Broad Fire is in Malibu, a coastal suburb of LA, and the Mountain Fire in Ventura County. Officials say several people are hurt, and numerous structures, including homes, have gone up in flames. Cheryl Hubbard has more details.
Forecasters say powerful winds and dry conditions are creating a, quote, life-threatening situation.
This fire is moving dangerously fast.
The Ventura County Sheriff's Office made 14,000 contacts Wednesday in an effort to get residents to flee.
You can find yourself quickly trapped, so we encourage you, when you get the notification, please leave.
While officials are warning residents, don't be a hero, one father-son team ignored that warning.
We're burning.
Dude,
right
look
here.
at you. Your shirt is singed.
All 3 of these houses would be gone if we weren't here.
But fierce winds are making the job of firefighters more difficult, with wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour expected to cross the area early Thursday.
It's so windy, you can't keep your hat on, and it's blowing the fire like crazy.
Red flag warnings, which warned residents of dangerous fire weather conditions, were in place for an estimated 25 million people, including the Los Angeles area Thursday. Southern California's main electric provider cut off power intentionally overnight to about 70,000 customers as a precaution.
The reality is that with everybody running their generators around here, there's far more risk of a fire starting from the generators than there is from PG&E's power lines.
In Ventura County, the Mountain Fire burned through a football field worth of land every 4 seconds Wednesday.
Every helicopter, every fixed-wing aircraft, everything we've been able to get a hold of is here fighting this fire.
I'm Cheryl Hubbard reporting.
The fire department says the blaze has sent several people to the hospital. According to fire officials, when crews first responded to the mountain fire in Ventura County Wednesday morning, it was 250 acres in size. By late afternoon, it had exploded to more than 14,500 acres by Thursday morning. Fallen trees and utility poles blocked streets in Havana today after the passing of Hurricane Rafael. The storm knocked out the country's electrical grid and left 10 million people in the dark. Satellite images showed Hurricane Rafael's path in the Caribbean as it swept by Cuba. Authorities struggled to restore the grid after it collapsed yesterday afternoon. Rafael was the latest blow to Cuba's already precarious electrical grid, which just 2 weeks ago collapsed multiple times. The U.S. National Hurricane Center in Miami said the hurricane moved 155 miles north and west of Havana this morning. It then spun into the Gulf of Mexico, where it wasn't an immediate threat to land. Rafael is the second hurricane to hit the island in less than a month after Oscar ravaged eastern Cuba in October. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President-elect Trump has secured over 4.5 million more votes than Vice President Harris, and Trump appears to have flipped a sought-after Democratic suburban area in Pennsylvania. That's Bucks County. NTD's election data analyst Kevin Hogan tells us how voter sentiment has changed across the country from 4 years ago and why Trump was able to take the lead there.
Yes, well, at least at this snapshot in time, former President Trump is leading by over 4.5 million votes. That could change because there are a lot of votes yet to be counted in deep blue California, but certainly the leader will not change. So considering that number, the nation as a whole shifted to former President Trump from the last election about 8%. So that's a very significant shift. And there are a couple reasons for this. Former President Trump built out his coalition of white working class voters to include a multi-ethnic working class coalition. And also he improved with the black male vote 8 points and the Hispanic male vote about 9 points. And then he also improved on his performance from 2020 until now among those young men, and that's seen probably as a reflection of visits on, for example, Joe Rogan's podcast. And Vice President Kamala Harris had a few challenges. She had a short time frame from when Biden dropped out of the race to Election Day, and also her strategy to put abortion at the center of the contest didn't pan out quite as well as she was expecting, with a big surge in the women vote, because it was only a marginal increase that she got. And there's poor public judgment of the border crisis that we've seen in the U.S. Southwest border, as well as inflation, which affects virtually every American. And Harris struggled by association because President Biden has very low approval ratings, and Harris being in his administration, that did not pan out too well for her, of course. And then she spoke on an interview with ABC's The View, and they asked her if she would do anything different from Biden, and she said, quote, "There is not a thing that comes to mind." And then the Trump campaign worked to push that video out to tens of millions of voters shortly thereafter. So where did this 8-point shift to former President Trump take place in the United States? Well, everywhere. In every single state in the whole country, it shifted to former President Trump, except Washington State. That shifted to Harris from 2020 about a quarter point, 0.3 points. So that was the only one. Every other state, from like a 10, 12 point margin down to about 1 point, every single state shifted to former President Trump. So that even includes areas like the congressional districts. For example, Nebraska's 2nd district, which Harris won, shifted to Trump about 3 points. I'll put that in yellow so you can see it. Shifted to Trump about 3 points. And even Maine's 2nd district went to Trump. That was about 1 point. And even Washington, D.C., which is a very deep blue stronghold, that shifted to former President Trump and now President-elect Trump by about 3 points. So you can see it's happening across the board here. And now it was the swing states that decided it. And so those shifted to former President Trump, President-elect Trump. 6 points in Arizona. Again, they're still counting these votes. 6 points in Nevada. North Carolina, 2 points. Georgia, 2 points as well. And then you have 3 points in Pennsylvania, 1 point in Wisconsin, and 4 points in Michigan. So you can see the battlegrounds shifted to Trump. Of course, he lost many of them in 2020, but now in 2024, he picked them up. We're also seeing a very unique trend in which states that have a larger Democrat margin, in which Biden won by more in 2020, they're showing a bigger shift to former President Trump, President-elect Trump. That's 12 points in California. That's the most. And then also 12 points in New York as well, 9 points in Illinois. And I'm just going to zoom in on the Northeast right here so you can get an idea. Again, a lot of Democrat strongholds in this area. New Jersey shifted to Trump, 11 points. And then also in Massachusetts, 9 points. And also Maryland, that's 10 points. So you can see former President Trump picking up a lot of ground in these deep blue states, although not winning them, but still driving up a lot of the margins in those areas. Now, we're going to look at some of these key counties that former President Trump managed to flip, which allowed him to win the presidency in part, at least. And for example, that is right here in southeast Pennsylvania, Bucks County. This is a collar county around Philadelphia. It's a suburban county, so I'm just going to circle that for you here, and we're going to drill down into it to look at some of the margins. Again, these numbers are changing all the time because they're counting votes. There are a lot of provisional ballots. But if you just take a look here at Bucks County and lock this, this is a county that Trump is carrying by about 1,300 votes. So again, that may change as they finish counting, but for him and his supporters, that's much better, even though it's only a handful of hundred votes. That's much better for him and his supporters than the 17,000 votes that President Biden won this county by back in 2020. A couple other key counties that Trump managed to flip in this election cycle were Northampton County. That's a state bellwether, very important, and also Erie County. These are very important battleground areas that Trump was able to flip, and part of the reason why he was able to carry the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A couple other areas, for example, right here in Michigan, you got Saginaw County, very important, although not very populated, because it's a very purple area, a lot of swing voters. And as you can see, back in 2020, Biden carried it, it was blue, now it's red. And then we're just going to slide over here to Wisconsin and take a quick peek. This is Sauk County right down here, and this went to Biden in 2020, but Trump managed to flip that. And again, not as many voters as some of the other counties in the state, for example, Milwaukee and Dane County, but very competitive area. You need to do really well there. And we're going to go down to Florida really quick to take a look at some of these other swing counties here that you can be considered swing counties. That's Miami-Dade. You see it's red back in 2020. Biden carried it. And then also Pinellas County and a couple others. You see they flipped to red in this election. And there are quite a few counties out in Southern California. So we'll take a quick peek at that. You could see a lot of red right here. And then in 2020, like even from San Bernardino up to Fresno, Biden carried those, but Trump was able to flip them, and also some counties flipping in Texas and elsewhere. Now, this is really important because it's not just it's the margins that also matter. So if Trump was able to do well in some of these areas, like, for example, right here, we'll zoom in on Detroit. A big issue for Harris was that there was going to be low turnout among those Arab Americans because they're not satisfied with the way that the Biden-Harris administration is handling the war in Gaza. So when you drill down into this county right here, again, this is Detroit, Dearborn, high Arab American population. You see that Harris, again, this election 2024 didn't have quite the same turnout levels as 2020, but still, she has a lead of about 247,000 votes. But you look back to 2020, President Biden carried this county with 332,000. So a significant drop in that particular county, which is not necessarily what the Harris campaign would have wanted, of course. Now, in Washtenaw County, this is right next door. This is Ann Arbor, so college town, a lot of liberal voters here. Harris got about 98,000 votes, whereas President Biden got about 100,000 votes. So not in the lead, of course. That's not a dramatic drop, but it is somewhat, because you still look at former President-elect Trump got 56,000 votes in 2020. 2024, he bumped that up. So that's about 2,500 votes or so that he was able to pick up, whereas Harris, 156.9 and 157.1, that's only a couple hundred votes, maybe less. So that's really not much change, whereas former President Trump picked up a lot of support. And why is that? Because, again, this is Ann Arbor. There are a lot of liberal voters there. In the city of Ann Arbor, Trump improved his margins by 17 points from last election to this election. So it's unclear exactly why, but pundits on a national level are looking to the fact that President-elect Trump may have picked up more support among those young male college voters, which could be the reason why he did a little bit better in that particular county in that swing state. Now, there are some counties that have a high percentage of Hispanic voters and a large number of them, 100,000 or more, that shifted to Trump. And we're going to take a look at this. You got Bronx County out in New York. I'll just make a big circle around that. And you have Miami-Dade as well as Osceola County, a lot of counties in southern Texas here. And, you know, again, from Fresno to Bernardino, a lot of these counties with the high Hispanic population. And you even got Yakima County up here in Washington and so forth. These counties shifted to former President Trump a combined 14 points from 2020 until this election. So if the whole nation shifted to Trump about 8 points with the decimals, the way it shakes out is that these counties shifted to Trump 7 points more than the rest of the country on average. Back to you.
And joining us now at the Election Data Hub is NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, looking at Trump's win on a state-by-state basis, what stood out to you the most?
Thanks, Tiff. You know, I want to look at two things here. First, how Trump did in 3 former swing states and how he did in 3 Democrat strongholds. First, let's look at those 3 former swing states which Trump won decisively in here in 2024. I'm talking about Florida, Iowa, and Ohio. Now, these numbers in red here, these are the margins of victory for Trump in 2024. First, Florida, which is becoming redder and redder by the day, just over a 13-point win here for Trump. That's the biggest victory by either party's candidate in this state since 1988, when Bush won this state over Michael Dukakis. How about Iowa? Again, just over a 13-point win here. That's the biggest victory by either party's candidate in the state of Iowa since 1972, when Richard Nixon won the state over George McGovern. And finally, Ohio, another former swing state here, just over an 11-point win here. That's the biggest victory by either party's candidate, again, since 1984, when Ronald Reagan won the state over Walter Mondale. Now, let's take a look at those 3 Democrat strongholds here. I'm talking about New Jersey, New York, and Illinois. I'm going to erase that real quick here so that doesn't get over that. New Jersey, New York, and Illinois. Again here, these are the margins of his defeat here. Now, this 5-point loss in New Jersey, that's actually the closest any Republican has come since 1992, when George Bush was within 3 points of Bill Clinton. Now, this 11.5-point loss here in New York, believe it or not, that's the best by a Republican since 1988, when Michael Dukakis took this state over George Bush. And finally, in Illinois, that 8.5-point loss in Illinois, closest since 1988, but George Bush won this time over Michael Dukakis. Now, let's take a look at one more thing here. Money, specifically party spending in 2024 on the presidential campaign. As you can see here, Democrats $1.8 billion compared to Republicans $560 million. So Democrats tripled Republicans in spending on their campaign. Let's take a look at this by candidate too. Again, these are the 2024 numbers according to the Federal Election Commission. As you can see here, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris spent just under $900 million each, compared to Donald Trump's, who spent just over $350 million. So both Biden and Harris doubled Trump in spending. Well, how'd they do it? Fundraising. Party fundraising here. Again, these are 2024 numbers for their presidential campaign. Look at this. Democrats just over $2 billion in fundraising compared to Republicans $630 million, tripling them in fundraising. And if we look at this by individual candidates, both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris fundraised approximately $1 billion this year compared to Donald Trump, who fundraised just under $400 million. So Tiff, despite all that fundraising, all that spending, it wasn't quite enough to get them over the top at the end. Back to you at the desk.
Dave, as always, thanks for joining us. Abortion laws were on the ballot in 10 states on Tuesday, reportedly one of the highest numbers ever in an election. NTD correspondent Jason Blair brings us the results.
Abortion was one of the biggest issues for voters in the 2024 elections. 10 states had pro-abortion ballot initiatives on Tuesday, and they passed in 7 and failed in 3. The states that passed the measures include Colorado, which now has legal abortion with no limit. Maryland also has legal abortion with no limit. New York has legal abortion until viability. and Nevada with illegal abortion until 24 weeks into pregnancy. Montana created a pathway to make abortion legal until viability, and Missouri and Arizona also created pathways to make abortion legal until viability. And states in which pro-abortion measures failed include South Dakota, which keeps a near-complete ban on abortion similar to Texas. And Florida keeps abortions banned after 6 weeks, and Nebraska keeps abortions banned after 12 weeks into pregnancy. This brings the number of states in which abortions remain legal to 28, including Washington, D.C., and this means abortion is allowed either up until viability, 22 weeks, the third trimester, or with no limits. Then another hot topic that was on the ballot on Tuesday was marijuana legalization. 4 states voted on it. It passed in 1 and failed in 3. Florida, North Dakota, and South Dakota all rejected efforts to legalize recreational cannabis use. Then Nebraska passed a measure to legalize and regulate medical cannabis use. Currently, there are 24 states, including Washington, D.C., that permit recreational marijuana use and 37 that permit medical use. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. How will foreign policy look like under the second Trump administration? We take a closer look at what Trump brings to the situations in the Middle East, in Ukraine, and with China. Joining us now is David Wormser, foreign policy specialist and Middle East affairs analyst at the Center for Security Policy. David, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. To begin, Trump promised in his speech to stop all wars. What changes do you see a Trump return to the White House bringing to the wars in the Middle East, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and the tensions in Asia?
Yeah, he promised war's end, and I think that's derivative of his first term, where he thought that American power was credible. People understood America was a dangerous country if you attack us or you attack our allies. And that formed a certain credible deterrence, as opposed to the current administration, where you have the famous don't, where we keep telling nations, don't dare. They dare, and then we do nothing, and so they do it again. So I think that's one of the biggest changes, and I think President-elect Trump, or former President Trump, or however one wants to say, will try to restore that sense of deterrence, and using his personal credibility from the first term to convince other nations, you have got to stop threatening our allies and got to stop threatening the United States, and that should bring a certain calmness and start ending some of these wars.
And speaking of that, when it comes to Iran, what can we expect? Will Iran do something in the 2 months before Trump gets sworn in, especially given the reports on Iran interfering with this election to try to avoid that second Trump term?
Yeah, this is the $1,000 question. Iran right now is really terrified of President Trump. They've tried to kill him. They've tried to kill several of the people who are going to be involved in this new administration, including what we hear is Brian Hook is heading the transition team for state. So he was one of those 3 or 4 that the Iranians have tried to kill. So this does not endear Iran to these incoming officials, including the president. So the Iranians know this and are quite scared, but they don't know quite how to react, because on one side, if they don't, Israel has really strategically inverted the circumstance on them, and they are now feeling the weight of Israeli power coming down on them, and that's humiliating and can threaten their regime. But on the other side, if they respond to Israel, the Israelis can strike back, and they can bring even worse on them. And now the Israelis have the tailwind of the incoming administration in anticipation in 2 months, which means the Iranians know whatever Israel does to them now, there's not a lot that can be done by reaching out to America to reverse it in 2 or 3 months. So they're quite scared, and they don't quite know what to do. My bet is they will do something, simply because if they do nothing, their impotence is really revealed, and for a regime like that, that's fatal.
And David, to your earlier point about credibility, we saw Iran's currency plunge to an all-time low Wednesday, as well as Chinese stocks taking a hit with the news of Trump winning. Is this an end to that perceived U.S. weakness on the international stage, especially after the Afghanistan withdrawal?
Yeah, I believe it's the beginning of the end. I mean, people will probe us and they will see. While I know President Trump would like to sort of extend deterrence globally and shut things down, I would expect some nations to probe that to make sure that that's really the case, or whether some of the more isolationist part of the Republican camp that wants no more wars would pull the president back. So I expect some probing, and that will be a little bit of instability at the beginning. But I do think that that sort of a deterrence globally will be restored, and that President Trump has this image of being tough, but not only tough, but not predictable. And people who want to probe America, people who challenge America, unpredictability is almost as frightening as power itself.
Zooming in on that in terms of China, Xi Jinping has congratulated Trump and called for peaceful coexistence and win-win cooperation. Now, several China analysts say that Beijing is watching the U.S. very closely now because Trump is unpredictable. How do you view that in terms of deterrence?
Well, I think the Chinese, if they were thinking of doing anything in Taiwan or elsewhere in the near future, would be quite cautious. Again, they may probe, but they'll probe on the margins. You saw them recently doing a lot of aggressive activity against the Philippines, as well as some against Vietnam. You could expect some of that to continue to see how America will react. But an overt, brazen challenge like invading Taiwan, I think they'll defer. The Chinese themselves, if I read their military buildup correctly, really only put 2027 or onwards as the correct date for when they feel that they will have enough ships and be ready to challenge us. But they may defer that a little bit if the United States begins to also rebuild its defense.
David Wormser, foreign policy specialist and Middle East affairs analyst at the Center for Security Policy. Thank you so much for joining us. Looking out at South America, how will the second Trump presidency affect U.S. relations with allies in Latin America? An expert tells us it might be more about the people around President-elect Trump rather than the commander-in-chief himself. NTD's international correspondent, Arian Pastar, is in Brazil to find out more.
President-elect Trump often touts his foreign policy, saying he got along great with heads of states from different nations. But will this hold up for his second presidency as well? For example, how is he going to handle relations with allies here in South America? To find out more, I spoke with Marcus Schottges. He's the editor-in-chief for the Epoch Times Brazil.
Right now, it's really a key moment to find out where U.S. leadership is going to go.
Schottges suggests that U.S. leadership now might be as crucial as it was during the Cold War. That's because back then, the U.S. had more global influence, but later started giving away its powers. And now new threats are emerging around the globe.
We're seeing a multipolar world, which with lots of new centers of power emerging. And the US has, to an extent, delegated part of the authority it had during the Cold War to multilateral organizations. So I mean G7, G20, NATO. And that's an approach that the Biden administration was really very fond of, what they call working with allies and partners. And Trump really has the America First approach to foreign relations as well.
While covering U.S.-Latin America relations, Schottges spoke with multiple former Trump administration officials. One of them worked on policy planning for Latin America with former State Secretary Mike Pompeo.
What did they tell you? What do they think about how the next Trump presidency will affect America's allies in South America and around the world?
What I have been hearing is that we still don't know a lot about that, how that is going to play out regarding Latin America, which of course is a very consequential region with the southern border. It will really depend on who he's going to have as his Secretary of State. Now we might see Pompeo come back. We're not sure about that yet. We have heard rumors that Mike Pompeo might be in the Defense Department right now on a second Trump administration. So we'll really have to wait and see on who are the officials that are going to be dealing with foreign relations.
He added that it's also crucial to look out for Trump's relation with Mexico over the next few months. Mexico recently elected a new president, Claudia Sheinbaum. The relationship between the two could have a significant impact on the immigration crisis in the U.S. Reporting in Brazil, Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And NTD's Arian Pastar also took to the streets of southern Brazil to find out how people there are feeling about Trump's victory. Take a look.
Most of the people here in Brazil pay close attention to the elections in the United States. Now that's first of all because they're both huge countries, right? Brazil and the US, but also because a lot of the food Americans eat on a day-to-day basis comes from here, from Brazil. Meat, for example. But at the same time, because of that, Brazil's economy depends on those exports to the US, at least to some degree. So it's a give-and-take relationship, meaning the elections in one country can, to some degree, affect people in the other country.
It was a good choice. It's an independent country. It can choose their leaders, and I think he is a good choice.
So do the people agree? Will the election in the US affect Brazil and other countries around the globe?
I think so. The strongest power around the globe affects all countries, not just Brazil, all of Latin America.
Given how strong of a power the US is, it affects Brazil a lot. Although I will say that our relationship with the US was better when Trump and Bolsonaro were in office.
Just like in the US, abortion is a major topic for many women in Brazil. Abortion has been illegal in the country since the 1940s.
For me, the U.S. was a reference for legalization. Now they're going backwards. So it was an example, but it won't be anymore. Now we have less of a chance to move forward.
Women should have the right to choose what to do with their own bodies, independent from certain religious beliefs or other reasons.
Do we have the right to do what we want? Yes, but that is placing huge future loads on the family system, including on the next children. So I think there are other ways that prevent getting pregnant before there is the need for abortion. So I think abortion is absurd, and I stand with those who are against it.
One of the people I spoke with, a lawyer from the south of Brazil, tells me he hopes Trump can bring changes to Brazil.
I think freedom has been undercut with our current government, and Trump might bring a relief so we can get our freedom back.
Brazil's Supreme Court banned Twitter after Elon Musk reportedly didn't comply with demands from the High Court. Musk alleged the demands were illegal and amounted to censorship. The tech entrepreneur might now become part of the next Trump administration.
I think Elon Musk will be a great help for Trump in the area of communication. He's a great entrepreneur, a great businessman, and I think he will bring good results.
Trump will, of course, take over the role as president for the second time. Can he improve compared to his first term?
I think he has more power now, with the majority in the Senate, and he won't be dealing with a pandemic.
Republicans won the majority in the Senate on Wednesday. They could also stay in power in the House, but it's too early to call as of Wednesday afternoon. Reporting in Brazil, Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Federal Reserve cutting rates again, this time by 1/4 of a percentage point. This brings the benchmark federal funds rate to between 4.5 and 4.75%. Here's the story.
The FOMC decided to take another step in reducing the degree of policy restraint by lowering our policy interest rate by 1/4 percentage point.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell announced Thursday the economy is expanding at a solid pace, unemployment is low, and inflation is making progress toward the Fed's target. He says the Fed is on its way to more stability.
We're on a path to a more neutral stance, and that's very much what we're on. That has not changed at all since September. We're just going to have to see where the data lead us.
A more neutral stance is one in which the Fed will implement a level of interest rates that's neither stimulative nor restrictive for the economy. This hypothetically allows the economy to develop at a natural pace. The Fed takes a neutral stance when it believes an economy is stable. Though instability could come under the new Trump administration, Powell says the election at the moment has no effect on policy decisions.
It's such an early stage. We don't know what the policies are, and once we know what they are, we won't have a sense of when they'll be implemented or all those sorts of things. So I think I would just say we're not doing that now.
Powell says policy decisions will be incorporated into Fed models.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.